Attention on deck. Welcome to the Warships Podcast with your hosts, Kelord, Kami Samurai, and Vanacera.
Hello and welcome to episode 43 of the Warships Podcast. Per our tradition for ranked seasons, today Arun returns to the show to give us the benefit of his thoughts. Welcome back, Arun.
Hey guys.
So, how have things been for you? Going for you, Arun? Has anything come up new, or is there anything going on new that you're planning for your YouTube channel?
Not really for the YouTube channel, but I have been streaming recently a lot more, so that's kind of the newer thing. I had a really long break in between somewhere.
So you said that you just did a 12-hour stream. How did that go?
I think the short stream went rather well.
If you call that a short stream, then we have slightly different definitions. So, as usual, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. And, I know I look forward to hearing your opinions on the Tier 6 ranked stuff, as well as our other topics. But before we get started talking about ranked, Kami has a quick announcement about the server clash this weekend. Kami, take it away.
Yeah, as you guys know, or might not know, NA is playing EU, this Saturday. So it's going to be interesting to see NA versus EU again. I think we had a server clash before, but that's been a long time ago now. I don't even remember when it was, but it's gonna be awesome. Representing NA, we have Team Apocalypse. They're represented by APOC. That's their in-game clan tag. We have MIA, and we also have Team Special Forces, and all these clans for NA. I know a lot of people in them. They're very good players. I hope they represent NA well. EU, they're bringing over some powerhouses. They're bringing TTT, OM, and Omni. So it's gonna be interesting to watching two different sides of the pond fight it out and go for bragging rights. We want to keep it clean. We want it to be fun. There could be a little bit of trash talk, but we don't want it to get out of hand. But I will be casting it along with Mijash this Saturday at 2000 Central European Summer Time, which is 1400 Eastern Time at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So come check out my channel. Check out Mijash. I believe Flamu and I'm having a blank. Isolate are doing it for EU. So it'll be a good time. And remember, just keep the trash talk clean. Enjoy the show. Root for your favorite players or favorite team. It's gonna be a fun time. So just and join us and have fun watching some competitive ships and see what it's all about. Because in A and EU, there's always that which region's better.
Yeah, we'll definitely get the links to those Twitch streams, including the EU ones, on today's episode. Arun, can you give us a little bit of a perspective about TTT and Omni and OM from your perspective as an EU player?
I honestly don't know. I know that all of the clans are considered to be good clans, and the players in them are also very good, but it's hard to say compared to NA, I think, other than past competitive matches.
Oh, I wasn't necessarily talking about, compared to NA. I was just, can you give us an idea of what those clans are like and what it is, when you see them in battle, what you can expect in like a random match?
Well, I don't really expect anything, because even the best clans can have people who mess up. Even the best players can make mistakes. It just depends if they are on top of their game. They are just good players, and if you recognize them, it's probably going to be an interesting match.
I guess that's a pretty fair way to look at it, that's for sure. Kami?
Well, a lot of players are recognizable by name. More so than others, because you probably recognize it because they play well, or maybe they don't play well. But typically, the big clans that are on any server, including SCA and Russia, you recognize, and this is just a way for, I think, some of the clans that are more recognizable on each server to battle it out. And like Arun said, even good players make mistakes. Not me, of course. Or, Kalorn or Vanessa or Arun, but everyone else makes mistakes. No, I'm just kidding. But, it's just it's going to be fun. That's what it's about. It's about fun. It's about bringing the ships community together and allowing some players to, play against some people that they probably don't play against. I mean, I play on EU a little bit, and I know Arun plays on NA, but I mean, a lot of players don't play on both servers. So this is a good way of getting some, competitive clans together that, are the best in their server. The teams we're bringing are, played in Supremacy League, and the teams they're bringing played in King of the Seas and all the tournaments EU has. So now it's bringing them together and letting them battle out and claim some bragging rights.
Well, before we get to start talking about ranked ships again, we do need to step back for a minute and talk about the Enterprise, how she's changed, and the future of the United States Navy's carriers with the AP bombs. Now, I did get a chance to play some test games with the Enterprise and the 1,000-pound bombs, and her striking ability, particularly against Tier 6 ships, is very outrageous. Nuking a Tier 6 battleship for more than half its health is a totally real possibility with just the AP bombers. That said, when she gets shoved into a Tier 10 matchmaking, it's a brutal experience. I've gone so far as to not launch my strike planes until a few minutes into the match, just to make sure I have some as the game goes on. But, let's focus on the AP bombs themselves. Arun, you said you did some testing with the AP bombs against different ships in the training room. Could you give us an idea of what you think this might do to the carrier playstyle for USN carriers?
Well, honestly, I would say that USN carriers with the AP bombs are going to be very selective in what they target, at least with those AP bombs, because from my testing, it seemed like AP bombs weren't very effective against some battleships, but they were very effective against others, and it was difficult to tell why. For instance, the Bayern was a target that was not easy to hit, and the same goes for New Mexico. However, if you attack the Fuso, you could basically one-shot the stock Fuso with 2 squadrons of AP dive bombers, whereas the New Mexico took 6,000 damage or 7,000 damage. So I think that that'll make the targets very selective for the AP dive bombers. And it also means that you can't really cause damage over time effects, because you don't have the fire stuff. You would have to use only your torpedo bombers for it.
Which is a lot easier to repair if you only have DOT damage coming from one source. Now, you did say that you hit a Moskva with the AP bombs off the Enterprise, correct, Arun?
Yes, I did, and the Moskva survived with 150 HP from 2 squadrons, from full HP. But of course, this was in a training room. In a real scenario, I think the Moskva presses T and you probably lose all your planes before any of them hit.
I think that's a very real possibility. I sent in my entire strike package from the Enterprise against a lone Yamato today, and every single plane was dead before a bomb was released or a torpedo went into the water. And the level of frustration that gave me, of being stuck in a Tier 10 match where every single battleship on the other team, every single one was Tier 10. None of them were anything but that. That's a really frustrating way to play the game, and that kind of irritates me that there will be a ship in the game that gets matchmaking like that. Now, I think that, Kami and I were talking a little earlier. Kami, we talked a little bit about that it's not that the Enterprise is underpowered or overpowered, it's the matchmaking it sees.
Yeah, I mean, it's still Tier 7 planes. When you see a Tier 10 game with Tier 7 planes, it's just, we posted screenshots about it, and, when you see double Minotaur, Des Moines, Yamatos, Montanas, I mean, it just makes it really tough to pick targets, to find that are capable that you can bomb. And your planes just get shredded. And, I know you have a large hangar, but really, if you think about it, you don't have that many. I feel like you don't have that many strike planes, if that makes sense. Because it feels like you run out very quickly if you're in an up-tier game. So you just got to be, picky and choosy on what you attack. And, I don't know. I love the Enterprise for the historical value, but the game, I'm not sure yet.
So I would like to add to that actually she doesn't have that many replacements at all. While she might have 96 hangar capacity total, 43 of those are fighters, and I think you had 25 torpedo bombers and 28 dive bombers. For comparison, Shokaku, with her Tier 8 planes, has 24 torpedo bombers and 24 dive bombers, so you actually do run out of replacements quickly, and for some reason the Japanese Tier 8 planes end up being really, really strong compared to their Tier 7 counterparts on top of that.
Yeah, that has been my experience so far with Enterprise, especially going against Shokaku. If a Shokaku player has fully buffed their fighters and is running as strong of a fighter as possible, I have straight up lost to Shokakus and was really taken back by that. I had to really kind of focus on my strafes and trying to do the best that I could do. I went against a fighter spec Lexington earlier, and there was virtually nothing I could do. It was a tie-up, try and strafe my own planes in order to shoot down as many as I could. But that was a really, really frustrating battle as well. I just did a couple games with the AP bombs, and in a real live meta, if you catch a battleship off guard, I just hit a Colorado straight off game start, sent my dive bombers up the middle of two brothers. There was a Colorado right there. First strike, one dive bomber group, 22K. And it was like, wow. Had another one on Gneisenau's, and I had a Tirpitz that I hit for 24K earlier, and really kind of shocked them. Like, they were just, going crazy in chat. And understandably so, because they don't expect this coming from a dive bomber. And so, it's interesting. And then, trying to get your torpedo bomber groups in there to, well, if I can just cause some flooding, maybe send one in at a time, cause flooding, and then send another one in after they've repaired and their damage con is up to start another flooding, and then maybe finish them off with AP bombs, or I don't know. The tactics are definitely different with this carrier, but you see so much good AA. And I had a game earlier where I literally could not do anything. I ended up being the last person on my team, and I was literally down to I had a torp group that had 2 planes left in it, and I had a mix mash of fighter groups that weren't even full. And that was it. They had Montanas, they had Des Moines, they had a Minotaur, even their destroyers were gearing, and it's like, my God, what can I do? I can't do anything. As soon as I get close, I start watching, these planes just disappear.
On the topic of the AP dive bombers, the reticle is actually different than what you're used to. It's like a really long and narrow one that pretty much covers like a decent-sized battleship. For instance, if you automatically click on a carrier, at least a higher tier carrier, the drop circle is bigger or smaller than the actual carrier itself. And this is automatic drops. Manual drops are only 10% smaller. So what you'll probably just do is just click with them. So you don't actually even need to aim them. And I noticed that the AP bomb damage for softer targets depended a lot on where the bombs landed. So yay for everybody, because we get more RNG.
Yeah, that was also, my kind of my experience with that. With, hey, you've got the reticle doesn't seem to change that much between an auto drop and a manual drop with it. So just kind of lining it up and going in. I've tried the auto drops or the manual drops. Haven't really been noticing much of a difference. But one thing for sure, you pretty much are specialized against battleships, because good luck trying to take out a destroyer with your torpedo groups, or trying to cross drop or dive bomb a destroyer, because it's really not going to happen. You're not going to do a lot of damage. I hit an AFK cruiser in my last match that I just did. AFK cruiser with the dive bomber groups. did like 6k damage. And of course, it's RNG. I have to definitely go in the training room and test it a little more. But I ended up just sending one Torp group at it to cause flooding and finish it off. Because it's like, well, save the dive bombers for a battleship, but good luck trying to do damage to anything else.
That was largely my experience as well, both to what Vanessa and Aaron are talking about. I think that I'm happy that Wargame is exploring other options. I don't know that AP bombs are the right move. This is not the first time that AP bombs have made an appearance in World of Warships. Those of you that played in the alpha know that there were AP bombs in the alpha test of World of Warships. At that point, those AP bombs were ridiculously overpowered, and they were removed from the game because of it. Now, there is a second AP bomb. The 1,000-pound AP bomb that we're testing with the Enterprise does a maximum of 7,300 damage. There is going to be a 1,600-pound AP bomb that we are supposing is going to be on the Midway. Might also be on the Essex with the upgraded planes. We don't know. And that does 9,100 damage. So you're looking at a maximum theoretical AP damage of 191,000 damage from the 21 dive bombers off of a Midway. So, that's a significant amount of damage, even if it only does a fraction of that, because not all of them are Citadels. You're talking about the ability to nuke battleships with just the dive bombers. Is that something that is going to be reasonable? I don't know. Midway planes are notoriously difficult to shoot down. That's one of the things that kind of balances out the Enterprise with these AP bombs. I find is that you're often not dropping all 10 that or 12 that you normally would, because they die on the way in. So I'm encouraged that they're testing things out to restore the power of the United States Navy carriers, because right now they're honestly in a place that they're just not worth playing.
Why don't they just use photon torpedoes?
That would be interesting. A little bit of photon torpedoes.
Just play Saipan.
Oh God, Saipan. Alrighty, well, let's move on and to the topic that you guys have all been waiting for, since you heard Arun's dulcet tones on the podcast this morning: ranked ship discussion. So this time I want to do things a little differently than we did for last season. We'll talk about each ship type in turn, so destroyers, cruisers, battleships, aircraft carriers, but I'm actually going to list all of the names of the ships of that type before we start the discussion, and I'd like us to try and give at least a short opinion with our reasoning behind that opinion for each ship, at least between all of us. So we'll start with the destroyers, and the list for destroyers at Tier 6 in ranked is the Anshan, the Farragut, the Fubuki, the Gaida, the Genevi, the Hatsuharu, the Shinonome, and the Gallant. Now, the Gallant is not in the game yet. It is still being tested, but there is a possibility that the Gallant will be in the game before the end of the ranked season. So, you're the guest, Arun. Let's give you first shot at your thoughts on the destroyers for a ranked season.
So, wait, destroyers overall, or the specific ones?
You can talk about specific ones within that list that I just gave.
Okay, so I think that in terms of destroyers, if we actually get the Gallant, then I think that she's going to be probably one of the strongest ones. Hatsuharu has the best concealment. The second one would actually be the Gallant. I think after that we get the Fubuki.
It does the Hatsuharu have the best concealment? Because I was running the numbers, and I thought Hatsuharu got 6.1 kilometers of detection.
Really? That might actually be true. I ran the numbers a long time ago, so I'm not quite certain of it anymore.
So, like Fubuki, I was looking at I have a fully upgraded Fubuki, and it gets 6.1 kilometers of detection. And that's with the captain skill and with the camo. So that's still not as good as a Gallant.
Well, at least from the Wikipedia article, the Hatsuharu should still be lower. She has a base concealment of 6.66. Fubuki is 7.02, so... But I would say that destroyers in this ranked season are mostly going to... Well, I guess there will be a split in destroyers. You won't see the same as we had seen in the last seasons, where you have a whole bunch of US destroyers running around with their amazing smoke screens, usable torpedoes, and then good guns. I think you will see that there will be more specialization. Farraguts will try to hunt down Shinnonomes and Fubukis and maybe Hatsuharus, and the others will try to torpedo their team. But I would say that I think
you're right, Arun. The Hatsuharu will have a 5.9 kilometer detection.
Okay.
My bad.
So I think that the Ernst Gede isn't actually going to be a very strong ship, mostly because of her weaker, concealment, smokescreen. Her damage output isn't that great. Her torpedoes aren't that long range. While she has a lot of things, I don't think that she is going to bring enough to the table. I also think that the Farragut isn't going to be as strong as US destroyers have been usually, mostly because her torpedo range isn't quite there, so she has a lot less versatility. I think that the Shinonome and the Gallant are going to be the stronger destroyers in this season.
Why Shinonome instead of Fubuki?
Fubuki as well, and perhaps even Hatsuharu. It's just that those are the ones that I usually mean. Shinonome just has nice guns, and that means you have versatility. But I think that the Gallant would take over the exact role of the Shinonome.
Fair enough. Kami, what are your thoughts on the destroyers for at Tier 6 that I listed?
Well, as you know, I played Gallant, and I really like the Gallant, so I'm going to have to rank that probably my number one. The ability to fire the torpedoes the way you can, and the detection. It's a great ship. The guns are decent as well. If I had to pick a second ship, if I was going to play destroyer, I'd honestly go with the Anshan. Again, the detection, I believe 6.1, if fully upgraded, but it has 8 kilometer torps. And it has Russian HE. So the guns don't turn. So if you get into a gunfight with like a Farragut, you could be in trouble just because your turrets won't keep up with your ship. But you will be able to wreck that Farragut if you keep distance. It's awesome. The Anshan and the Gallant would be my two choices for DDs. If I wanted to be stealthy and just like shoot torps into a pack of people sitting in smoke, I guess I'd go with like the Fubuki or the Shinonome. I would never recommend the Hatsuharu. It has 5.9 concealment, but that thing, I feel that ship's pretty trash. And the Farragut's the Farragut. So, there's going to be a lot of players, I think, that have ranked out with maybe the Benson or ranked out with the Mahan or the Sims are going to just play the Farragut because it's USN. They're used to the arcs. The one thing is, you don't really have the torps to break up smoke. So that's going to be a little bit different. And you have one of the higher concealments. So that's, but you also have the most utility for the team because you have the American smoke. So, we all worried about smoke meta. So I would expect to see a lot of Farraguts just because of the USN smoke and saving teammates. So I don't know. But if I had to choose, I would go with the Gallant and then the Anshan.
So the one thing about the Anshan, Kami, is that with everything, it's going to have a concealment of 6.3. And I found when I went through and looked at the concealment, all of the destroyers at Tier 6, most of them, like the Genevi, the Genevi, the Gaida, the Farragut, they're all right at that 6.3, 6.4 region, except for the Gallant and the IJN destroyers, which are in that 5.9 to 6.1 region in terms of concealment. Now, those buffers are a lot smaller than we're kind of used to seeing in between the different types of destroyers at Tier 8 and Tier 7. So I feel like there isn't like the quote-unquote stealth destroyer role of the IJN ships. I don't feel like it's going to be that as prevalent or as powerful as it has been in previous seasons.
Yeah, because if you think about it, you have, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4 kilometers in between. It's going to take a very skilled DD driver to keep that as your, that buffer zone intact. Because all you guys got to do is turn at each other for a few seconds and you've closed that distance. So, like you said, this season there isn't, the ranges between the concealment are a lot smaller. Because I mean, when you think about even tier 7, I mean, you had what was the Mayhem, like 6.9, I think. But then you compare that to like the Shiratsuyu, who, I mean, it was like 5.8 or something, 5.9. So that's a whole kilometer. But now you look at this ranked season at tier 6, you guys converge. You guys are going to spot each other almost instantly. There's not going to be, oh, where's that DD? Because you're going to be able to see each other more than likely. So I think it's going to come down to the DDs that actually have longer range torps. I think if you're going to play a DD, what's the Fubuki, 10 kilometers, right?
The Fubuki's 10 kilometers. The Anshan's 8. The Gaida's 8. I mean,
Gallant's 8.
Gallant's 8. The Farragut's like 6.2. Arun,
yeah.
Did you have something to throw in?
Yes, I actually think that this season is going to be somewhat different in terms of how DDs play. I think that this season it's more likely that DDs will end up fighting each other a lot less, and I think they will do more in terms of spotting, capping, and perhaps torpedoing, or, if they're a Farragut, smoking up their team and then shooting from there. Because there are no radar cruisers this time, right? And, that means that destroyers aren't at risk of, suddenly being spotted if they don't actually see a ship. So, and the other thing is that because of the lack of as many, torpedoes on certain types of destroyers, I think battleships are going to be a lot less careful, I guess, and, be a lot scarier.
Vanessa, could you throw in your kind of opinions on the various destroyers? We haven't really heard too much about the Gaida, and I know that you play the German destroyers a fair amount.
Yes, I do. Regretfully, not that one so much. I just don't know how it's going to work in this environment because you're going to need some decent smoke. I mean, the guns you could make work. The torpedoes you could definitely make work. But I think the sum of its parts are not going to be conducive to bringing it to a ranked meta. That being said, I feel Anshan and Gallant will be, if we get Gallant during the ranked season, are going to definitely be the destroyers to bring. I feel Farragut will definitely have a place, especially for people who are, have gone up the USN line, are used to that. I'm still trying to think which IGN destroyer I would want to bring. I feel that maybe all of them might be viable, especially, when there's just going to be so much smoke, you're going to be spamming torpedoes. And people like to just sit and smoke. And, I mean, there's been so many times, even in my Sims the last season, it was so easy to just throw those scene lines out there and wait, a minute and a half later or so, and boom, there's a bunch of torpedo hits because people just camp and smoke and they don't understand. So I think the destroyers to have are going to be Anshan and Gallant.
I think that one of the big surprises for me was Arun throwing out the Shinonome. I don't play my Shinonome very often. I kind of, if I am going to play that playstyle, I usually have been playing the Fubuki. So I think that he brings up an interesting point, that the Shinonome, for the people that have it, is going to be an interesting DD for playstyle if you want to go for that kind of torpedo meta. So, yeah, I mean, Arun, you brought up just a minute ago in chat that the Farragut's 6.6 kilometers of detection. How big of a disadvantage is that here for the Farragut itself, Arun?
I don't think it's actually that big of a disadvantage in most cases, but I think capping is going to be a very important thing because this time you can't have caps covered by a radar, right? So if your DD is spotted while the other DD isn't, and the stealthier destroyer is actually capping it in a smart way where they are, maybe reversing into the cap zone or being like right on the edge, and then, start running away, your Farragut might not actually be able to ever spot that destroyer. Meanwhile, she is going to be constantly shot at by the opposing team. But I will say about the Shinonome earlier, though, that while I do think that destroyers aren't going to fight each other as much, Shinonome is more like the version that you would use with the guns as well as the torpedoes.
One of the interesting things that there are things that interested me when you brought that up, Arun, is that I've been really enjoying the Harikaze, the high school fleet ship, the Harikaze, with the 100mm guns on it, and the ability of having that balance of torpedoes and guns that actually do something. I really, really liked that, and I really enjoy playing that ship in that playstyle. So the Shinonome kind of strikes me as the possibility of being able to do that kind of playstyle at Tier 6.
I definitely have to agree with that.
So let's move on to cruisers real quick, and we've sorry, go ahead, Vanessa.
I was trying to interject real quick. With Shinonome, she only has 8-kilometer torpedoes, whereas Fubuki has 10. Granted, the Shinonome's torpedoes are 63 knots, so they are pretty quick. But yes, you are doing basically the old B-hull Fubuki that a lot of people used to do at Tier 8, but you only have 8-kilometer torpedoes. So Fubuki is still going to offer something a little better in that department if you need torpedoes with a little more range.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to end up being, what play style do you want to play, and kind of go from there. So, like I said, let's move on to cruisers, and the list of cruisers is pretty extensive. We also have quite a few premium cruisers in this list. So, without further ado, we've got the Aoba, the Budyonny, the Cleveland, the De Grasse, the Duca d'Aosta, the Graf Spee, the La Gassinière, the Leander, the Molotov, the Nuremberg / Makarov, which we'll talk about in a minute, and the Perth. Now, we started with Kami, and we've talked to Kami and Arun first a couple of times, so let's start with you, Vanessa. Now, one of the things that really strikes me about this list, Vanessa, is that there are only a couple of heavy cruisers on this list, namely the Graf Spee and the Aoba. With the large number of light cruisers on this list, is that going to affect the anti-DD kind of play and cap zone kind of play, do you think, in this season of Ranked, even though it doesn't have, none of these ships have radar?
Yeah, that's a good point. I feel personally Aoba would be a really, really good choice. Though, with the playstyle of Duca d'Aosta and being able to just throw that ship around and all the utility that it brings, I'm really leaning towards that cruiser this ranked season, especially if you know other people are going to bring cruisers. That AP is just so good, especially at max range. And you get a spotter plane, so you can really kind of do a little bit of everything with that ship, even if you're not doing crazy amounts of damage. Just the utility that you're bringing alone could really kind of shape the meta of this ranked. A lot of those other cruisers, especially the light cruisers, yeah, if you detect a destroyer, I would definitely presume everyone's going to be shooting at that destroyer, obviously, just like previous ranked seasons. But I think a little more so with this one, because as soon as you're lit, you are going to have only a very small window to get your damage in. And this may be where the IJN destroyers really kind of maybe shine a little bit, is they can get a little closer, maybe detect the other destroyers just by a little bit. A smart destroyer player will know how to kind of work that little gap. And I could definitely see, cruisers just pouncing on that. Definitely, I've thought about Perth with that creeping smoke that could really kind of, with the smoke module, I believe your smoke is active for 200 seconds or pretty close, or maybe it's, I want to say it's 2 minutes. I'll have to look at it again, but I know with the smoke module, your smoke lasts quite a while as far as its active time. And you could really hey, you got a battleship that maybe wants to kind of creep along with you and surprise. Maybe you could kind of throw some people off, but I don't know. That might just be a crazy torp magnet and maybe not really work well. Graf Spee, I think a lot of people are going to use Grosh Bay, and I think a lot of people are going to have success with Grosh Bay, especially people who know how to work that ship. And it has 8-kilometer torpedoes too. So not only does it have, decent guns when they hit, it's got great torpedoes, pretty good speed and maneuverability for the size of the ship that it is, and it has a hull heal. So, you got a cruiser that's hull healing at tier 6. It's going to be pretty good.
So, Arun, with taking into consideration the stuff that Vanessa just said, we saw in the last ranked season that the British light cruisers are a huge force multiplier for your team. Do you think that is also going to be true of Leander and the fact that she has so much fewer guns than like the Fiji does?
I actually don't think so. But I might be wrong on this one. I just don't really... Me and Leander don't really get along that well. Although it is nice to have a cruiser that is slightly less likely to get one shot than the lower tier ones, and I guess some of the higher tier ones. I actually think that in terms of British cruisers, the Perth is far more interesting, because if you have a creeping smoke, right, it's a lot more difficult to actually torpedo that one if it's moving at certain types of angles than it is to torp a normal smoke, because the smoke is moving.
That's an interesting point. Are there any other cruisers on the list that kind of strike you as that they might be pretty good? I know, we're going to see a lot of Clevelands. I mean, there's just everybody seems to have one. But I've also read some things that people think that the Cleveland's just not going to be that great this season.
Well, I still think that most of the matches are going to revolve around battleships, and so I think that the cruisers that will do best against battleships as the main focus are going to be better. So I expect something like a Budionni to do well. I also expect Cleveland's to do well, but the aim is going to be kind of difficult, because you might not be able to get as close as you would like, safely to try to fight, but you might be all right. Of course, the battleship that for some reason is listed as a cruiser is going to be good. That is the Graf Spee. Other than that, I'm not quite certain. I'm not really sure how much cruisers are going to determine things in this ranked season, other than the ones that will be able to burn all the battleships down.
Speaking of burning battleships, Kami, there are a couple of, both the De Grasse, the Budionni, the La Gassinière, and the Molotov, and to some degree the Nuremberg as well, they're all kind of known as burning HE flinging style light cruisers. Where do you feel that those ships are going to kind of come into play in terms of the ranked season, especially like if Aaron says or if Aaron is correct, and that it's going to be a pretty heavily battleship heavy type of season?
Dead? No. It's tough to say, because if I remember right, a few older ranked seasons you had tier 6, right? Like to get to a certain rank.
Yeah, up to like rank 12 or 15 or something.
And then you switch, right? Well, it's tough to say, because those cruisers are so squishy. And if the battleship play, like if it's heavy battleships, if those battleships all shoot at those cruisers at the same time, if they're lit, I mean, everyone knows shooting at a Nuremberg with a battleship, what happens? It just goes poof. The same with the Molotov. The French cruiser, I don't know how to say it, the La Gasoline or whatever you want to call it. It's an interesting ship, because shooting at those with battleships, I overpin the crap out of it a lot. But if you hit that ship and it's angled, it just goes away. So I don't know. Like, the light cruisers are going to be interesting, the ones that you mentioned, because they are flamethrowers. They have high rate of fire, decent fire chance. If I was to pick kind of a cruiser like that, I would probably play the D'Aosta, just because of the torpedoes and the speed. I would probably pick that as my choice. But
I wonder a little bit about the De Grasse, Kami. I mean, the Degrassi is really quite a good ship. And it's very new, and it's new in the shop, and very few people have it. But it's got a lot of solid gun advantages.
It does. I think it does have the range advantage, I believe. What is it, 16? Is it 16? 16.3 or something? Something like that? I can't remember.
16.2. You were very close.
But so you think about it, it has 16.2, and what's a Cleveland? 14? And we all know what the Cleveland does at range. I mean, it shoots moonshots. So that could be a good choice. You could be able to sit farther back and just rain fire on targets that are spotted, since you do have the range. But again, if you do get lit, man, it's just you're playing with fire, with those ships. So I don't know. If I had to choose what I would play as a cruiser at tier 6, like you said, we see a lot of Clevelands. But, I've made a lot of fun of the Graf Spee in randoms just because I think it's a turd. But if I had to choose a cruiser to play, I would probably choose the Graf Spee. You get 11-inch guns, you get 8-kilometer torps, you get a heal. I mean, you get decent concealment. And those guns, if you get a broadside cruiser, if you get good RNG, you could just delete a cruiser. So I'd probably go with that. And those 11-inch guns, they typically don't overpin the light cruisers as much. If I had to pick a second, it'd probably be the Perth. I know I'm picking ships that I make fun of all the time, but ranked and competitive play are completely different than randoms. And the Perth being able to shoot HE as a British cruiser, I mean, I think that's huge. And the unique smoke being able, it brings a lot. The one thing you run into is the Perth / Leander. They both have 12.8 kilometer range. So you got to put yourself kind of in a position where you could eat torps or you could get nuked by a battleship if they know how to aim.
But they also have 8.8 kilometer detection, which is significantly better than any of the other cruisers.
Yeah. So I mean, if you get into a bad situation, you might be able just to turn around and leave. So I mean, there's so many options as a cruiser. But like you said, a lot of them are premiums. So that's going to play a part in too what you have in your port. But I would definitely say the Graf Spee, the Perth / Leander, and maybe the Degrassi. I'm not a Cleveland fan, but I know Clevelands with IFHE are very annoying. And if you can get into a position where you can start raining down on battleships, I mean, battleships don't like Clevelands. So, but if it turns out like Arun said to be a battleship heavy meta, I mean, cruisers, man, you make one mistake in a cruiser. Even sitting in smoke, you make a mistake, it could be game over.
I was actually. Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
Aaron. Go ahead.
Okay, so I was thinking about the Duca d'Aosta, and I think that it's interesting that she actually should have the longest range torpedoes at tier 6 at 12 kilometers, and she can actually stealth torpedo. On top of that, she has very, very accurate guns, or very fast shell speed, I suppose. So you can actually stay really far away, and I wonder if this might actually play very well with fighting against battleships, because if you have a target that's like 10 kilometers from you, but there's a cruiser 15 kilometers behind, or 5 kilometers behind that, you'll probably not really be as interested in shooting the cruiser. So I think that might actually be an interesting choice, although the downside is that not only is the Duca d'Aosta a premium, she's an Italian premium, which means that you probably don't have captain skills for it.
That is definitely the downside. I think that there's a lot of unique play styles among the cruisers at tier 6, particularly the premium ones. Vanessa, I know you wanted to jump in there as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, do not discount Aoba, because that cruiser does, one, it's a heavy cruiser. Its guns are pretty good. Not only are they pretty good, they are a sniper. They shoot and hit where you aim. So that is a very good and effective cruiser. Not only, it has really good torpedoes too. Yes, you have to expose yourself, but you have good detection range as well. So it's a very solid cruiser. And, from the past rank seasons, the cruisers that I've seen try to hang around and maybe try and just sit behind an island and spam HE, I haven't always seen them do well or really hit. I mean, how many times do you see a battleship that is bow on, reversing, maybe hiding behind an island, and, is just there constantly lit to allow a cruiser to even, fire at them. Someone comes along and smokes them, and then that's that. So I just don't see a Cleveland doing well. Degrassi, because that ship has the range, and it also has 9-kilometer torpedoes, brings some various options that, make that worthwhile. And you fire those guns and you start a fire. It's so ridiculous how many fires you start with Degrassi that, you just need one hit and there, you got your fire. So I definitely can see Degrassi working as, a support cruiser in the back. D'Aosta, you angle, you use that speed, you throw that ship around, you are going to annoy so many people. In that spotter plane, you can throw that up in the beginning and really harass people, throwing HE or, even just firing AP just to annoy people and just, get them off their game.
It's interesting that you brought up the Aoba. I despise that ship. I find it to be underpowered. You call it a sniper. I find the dispersion on that ship to be terrible. But I mean, we all have different experiences with ships. But I welcome people that bring the Aoba. I'll just nuke them off the map because I find that ship not to be that great. I don't think it brings anything better to the table than the other ships that we've talked about. I mean, you do get, I guess you get 8-inch guns, but I just don't. I've never liked that ship, and maybe that's just me. And I kind of think like if you bring an Aoba, you're going to kind of get those comments like, "Oh no, they brought an Aoba," kind of like what we saw in Myokos, a couple seasons ago. I don't know. That's just my personal opinion, but I've never liked that ship, and I think that it could be a detriment to your team because you say you have to expose yourself to get your torpedoes off. Well, a lot of people like to fire torpedoes. And I just feel like you're going to try to fire people. A lot of people are going to try to fire their torpedoes in that ship and just get nuked by battleships. But it can go. That ship might be a ship that you take out on the flank and just harass people. I don't know, but I think there's better choices that will keep you alive more often. I don't know.
Yes, but with Aoba against another cruiser or destroyer, if you angle and if you work your speed, other cruisers, especially if they don't have FIHE, are going to really struggle to do any damage or anything to the Aoba. The Aoba can really bully other cruisers, especially with those 8-inch guns. And angle and varying your speed, there's really not much that you can do against Aoba. I've used Aoba a lot. It's one of my favorite lower tier Japanese cruisers, and really love that ship. Have had a lot of success with it, and have carried quite a few tier 6 ranked matches from several seasons ago because people underestimate that ship, and I feel it's a very good cruiser.
I have to wholly disagree with you. I don't think it's a good cruiser at all. You talk about bullying, but what do you do against a Graf Spee? It's just the rate of fire I think gets you in the sense of if you're fighting a Cleveland with IFHE, or if you're fighting even a Nuremberg, you show any bit of side, the Nuremberg is just going to citadel you off the map. I don't know. It's interesting to say that you bullied people in that ship, and I could see in situations where that ship is decent, but I just find that I think the reload's going to get you, and I think you got to show. I don't know. People will all play ships differently, and people will find their ship. Like and for example, a couple seasons ago, the Chapayev, I laughed at it when we first talked about it. I'm like, it's not going to be very, and then that's what I ranked out with like an 80% win rate. So I'm not saying, Vanessa, that you're not going to do well on that. And I fully encourage you to play and prove me wrong. But I don't know if the normal World of Warships player that doesn't have very much experience and maybe tier 6 or playing that ship is going to have the same success that you have had.
That's an interesting point, but let's move on to battleships. But before we do, I would like from each of you 2 cruisers from the list that you think you would play, and 1 cruiser that you absolutely wouldn't. So, Vanessa, let's go with you first.
Gosh, out of all of them, Deosta and Graf Spee. And as far as what I wouldn't play, oh geez, probably Budiani. La Glacine.
Okay. Arun, 2 that you would play and 1 that you wouldn't.
I would play as well the Graf Spee and the Budiani, but I definitely wouldn't want to play the Gasoline. That is the Tier 6 French cruiser.
The Gasoline.
I mean, technically they're pretty much all the same. They're really squishy ones for me. So it's just I picked one of them since I've recently played a lot of her.
Fair enough. Kami, 2 that you would play and 1 that you wouldn't.
I would definitely play the Graf Spee because of the heel, and probably the Perth. And the one I wouldn't play would be the Ioba.
See, I'm going to go a little off base here and say that I would play the De Grasse and the Leander. The De Grasse because I think that its ability to harass with HE is significant, and its AP is actually quite good. And can hit very well at longer ranges against cruisers. The Leander, because of the smoke, and it's a kind of a fun play style with the torpedoes. And as far as not playing so much, the Nuremberg and I just do not get along, and I don't think that it's a great way to play the game for ranks. Arun, did you have something to add before we go on to battleships?
Yes, actually it was specifically about the Nuremberg. Do you think that the change for the HE penetration has made any difference with her, like in terms of power?
No, because the HE was always decent with the Nuremberg, because if you fired so fast, it was never a problem that you couldn't get fires with the Nuremberg. The problem with the Nuremberg is always that it gets nuked off the map so easily that if you're not going to increase its protection, then making the guns better doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it's a glass cannon. It's the definition of a glass cannon. The guns are great, but I mean, you can't survive any hits.
Do you disagree, Arun, or I guess you were the one that brought that one up? So
No. I was merely curious because I kind of agree that she has trouble with surviving, but I was just thinking that the Nuremberg has really fast shells, so you can actually stay far away. And if you think about rank, then it tends to be that people tend to be a lot closer together, except some people who, stay really far away. So it's likely that you would have very many ships in front of you that are more likely to get shot at. So I'm just wondering if maybe the Nuremberg could be somewhat even maybe an okay idea.
I think, last season we really harped on how bad the Pensacola was, yet there was a guy that ranked out exclusively in the Pensacola. So I don't think that so I'm going to learn from that experience and say that I don't think that the Nuremberg is an unplayable ship. I just wouldn't choose to play her because of the way that I like to play.
We have our own opinions on ships that are going to be good and bad. But that we don't want to dissuade you guys from playing whatever you feel comfortable in. I know there's been a couple people like last season that ranked out in the Pensacola, and we laughed. We're like, Pensacola, what? Maybe it gives you a challenge. I mean, more power to you if you can rank out in the Nuremberg. I mean, that's that's going to be one that's fun. But I mean, maybe you're really good in that ship and you know how to play it. The ins and outs of it. So don't take our word as gospel. Just, these are our opinions, and you guys rank out in whatever ship that, you feel comfortable in.
I definitely agree with that one, especially about these Tier 6 rank things about destroyers and cruisers. I am not really that certain of, what I have expressed. This is just conjecture on my part, mostly.
Admitting fault. No, Aaron, who knew? No, I'm kidding. So let's move on to battleships. We've talked about battleships a little bit a couple of weeks ago, and this is by far the most battleships in one tier of any tier in the game. And we have a ton of premium battleships at this tier. So let's. One of the things I want to talk about is focusing on here is what are we looking at in terms of the premium battleships versus the non-premium battleships, and is there a distinct kind of pay-to-win advantage here as we talk about battleships? Now, the list is the Arizona, which is a premium, the Bayern, which is not, the Dunkirk, which is a premium, the Fuso, which is not, the Mutsu, which is a premium, the New Mexico, which is not, and the Warspite, which is a premium to finish off the list. So let's start with Kami. Everybody knows that Kami loves the Fuso, but are you going to play it this season, Kami?
I'm actually going to be playing the Dunkirk. Nothing? Okay.
If you
funny.
rank out in the Dunkirk, Kami, if you play nothing but the Dunkirk and rank out, I will give you 5,000 doubloons.
Just the Dunkirk. Oh, you guys heard it. It's interesting you bring up premium versus non-premium because there are kind of, I feel, parallels in between a couple of them, like the New Mexico and the Arizona. Everyone knows my feeling on the New Mexico. I despise the New Mexico, but I love the Arizona. So I would, man, it's so tough because I love battleships. And I love Tier 6 battleships because I think they're all playable and they're all fun, including the Warspite, which I make fun of all the time. But the Fuso, of course, everybody knows that's my baby. And but do I recommend it in ranked? To be honest with you, I don't know, because if you have to sit bow on the Fuso, is that kind of a disadvantage? You only have the two front turrets. It's you got to, for the Fuso to work, you got to get all those turrets on, which puts you puts you pretty broadside, because you need to get the shotgun going. Now, the one thing the Fuso does have is it has a great reload time, and the AA, even with it buffed, is not good at all. I mean, you can shoot down a plane here or there, but I do love the Fuso, but the Arizona, if I had to choose, would probably be my battleship of choice because of how accurate it is. And I feel like the Arizona, when you get shells on target, it just wrecks ships. I do not have a Mutsu, so I can't really comment on that. But the 16-inch guns at Tier 6, being able to pin, I'm pretty sure they can pin anything at that tier.
They absolutely can, from any angle.
The one thing about the Mutsu I know is it does have pretty crappy armor. The Warspite is the interesting choice. Now, I like to make fun of the Warspite because of the short range and randoms, but I think in ranked, that range really isn't going to play a factor, and the Warspite hits really hard and has a great, it just has a great sense of maneuverability. It's a small target. I wouldn't put it past the Warspite being played by a lot of seasoned battleship players. And then of course the Dunkirk. You heard Colord's offer, but I don't know. I don't know if the Dunkirk has the punching power that the other battleships do. Because the one thing that I noticed about ranked every season when it comes to battleship play, you got to be able to punch out the cruisers when the cruisers are spotted. And I don't know if the Dunkirk is accurate enough to do it, because every time I play that ship, I feel like half my salvos, my ship's accurate. The other half, I might as well just not even watch them and just go reload and fire again. And I don't know if it has the power that the other ships have to knock out the cruisers. Now, if you're going to spam HE, it's definitely good at that. And it has a good reload time. And I find the armor to be quite trolly if it's angled on. But Tier 6 battleships are going to be a lot of fun, and I expect to see a lot of Fuso, Arizona. I hope to see a lot of New Mexico just so we can bully it. But I mean, man, I don't know. It's just going to be fun. Tier 6 is going to be fun because I love Tier 6 battleships.
Arun, you just posted a pretty interesting penetration chart that's showing the Arizona as having the best penetration among the tier.
No. That's not quite true.
Okay,
it doesn't actually have the New Mexico right in there, and it doesn't also have the Dunkirk. But that one shouldn't really affect the results. The New Mexico should be slightly above the Arizona. But yeah, the Arizona should be the highest of these, and it's very close to the New Mexico as well. I don't think there should be much difference between them. I think the interesting thing about the penetration chart is rather how low the Mutsu is, in that she actually at range ends up the second worst one, with the Bayern being the worst one. Personally, though, I also think that the Arizona is going to be the best battleship in this kind of sense, and I also like the Fuso, but I kind of feel the same way, that I think the Arizona might be a better choice. Now, I kind of disagree about the New Mexico, though. I think actually that the New Mexico might be surprisingly powerful. Maybe not as accurate, but, I think if you don't have the Arizona, the New Mexico can still put up a very good fight. As far as Warspite goes, though, I don't like that ship. But with the buff turret traverse, maybe she'll be okay. But I have just found that I just can't hit... I can't hit anything with her, at least not with enough shells.
Kami, did you want to say something before we jump into Vanessa?
I forgot the Baron.
Really?
Not really. No, I wouldn't. But it's funny that I say that, because that ship, I feel, is one of the trolliest ships in the game for its tier. I have, even with a tier 8, tier 7, tier 8 battleships, I always tend to not get very good damage on that ship. I just feel like its armor is very good. But its guns, man, I don't know. I don't know how accurate they are. When they hit, I feel like they do good damage, but I don't know. Maybe I forgot it for a reason. Maybe just because it's kind of average. But I will say, to Arun's point, the New Mexico, what it does do well is you can angle pretty well in the New Mexico. And I hate to admit there's something good about the New Mexico, but you can angle very, very well in that ship. And honestly, when you think about accuracy at tier 6, I mean, if you think about the New Mexico and the Fuso, they're both shotguns. The Warspite, you kind of feel like it's a sniper. I don't know about the Mutsu. I guess it's the same because it has, fewer number of barrels. And the Arizona is kind of, I feel like, a mix. You can shoot at range and you can brawl with it. So I don't know. It's going to be fun to figure out.
Before I throw in my 2 cents, Vanessa, do you want to give us your opinion on the battleships?
Yeah, so Mutsu, because torpedoes, right? Yeah? Okay,
definitely the torpedo.
I do feel Mutsu is going to be an interesting pick for this season. I do expect to see a lot of Arizona players, especially if you don't see too many carriers. If you do see a lot of carriers, I would expect Arizona players to just be, the salt to just be real. New Mexico and Fuso, it's going to be a good choice. If you don't have a lot of premiums, yeah, totally bring those 2 ships, because they are good. They compete. They're going to be well. If I do bring a battleship, I think it will be Warspite, because when it's time to colonize, you absolutely bring out Warspite and you just wreck everything. And I've wrecked Fusos, I've wrecked New Mexicos, you name it, I have done serious damage with the Warspite. Even doing a secondary build on it and, just zipping that. The Warspite can absolutely turn on a dime. She's got amazing agility. Yeah, she bleeds a lot of speed, but my gosh, Warspite is a great battleship. The only issue that I've ever run into with Warspite is I feel the accuracy is sometimes so good that when you're trying to shoot at a cruiser, the cruiser just kind of sees where the shot's going and then just either kind of slightly angles or just slightly dodges that incoming shell. And it's like, just, yeah, troll, yeah, you're so laser accurate that I know I just need to move just this much and I dodge it, and can be really frustrating. But when you do hit something, especially battleships, you get a hold of it and you do serious damage.
So I also am on Vanessa's side here, that I will probably be playing the Warspite and the Mutsu. And, it's interesting. Arun gave us the tier 6 battleship armor penetration curves, which I will be adding a link to in the episode description. while they show that the Arizona and the Fuso are kind of, and the New Mexico are kind of on the top of that particular heap, what they're not showing is the ability of the Dunkirk, or it's not the Dunkirk, excuse me, the Warspite, the Bayern, and the Mutsu to overmatch the bow armor of some of these battleships. I absolutely expect to see bow on battleships that I'm going to have to shoot at. And if you have to do that with an Arizona, you're not going to get any penetrations. Now, you see, when Mutsu wasn't in the game and Warspite wasn't being played very often because of the turret traverse, you would often see Dunkirks going bow in against Arizonas and New Mexicos and Fusos, and just being able to just shrug off their shots because they couldn't overmatch the bow armor of the Dunkirk. But if the moment that a Dunkirk gets shot at by a Bayern, or gets shot at by a Mutsu, or gets shot at by a Warspite, or any of these battleships, in fact, gets shot at by those ships, it can go right through the bow and citadel you from the bow because of the overmatch ability, even though their actual armor penetration isn't as good as the Arizona and the New Mexico and the Fuso. So I think that that's going to be a very important thing. Maybe not so much at lower ranks, but as you pushed for that rank 5 to rank 1 bracket, if you want to be playing a battleship, you need to be able to overmatch the armor of the front of the battleships that you're shooting at. Kami, did you want to throw something in?
Yeah, if this turns into a bow-in meta, do not be afraid to shoot HE at opposing battleships. I hate to tell people that because I fear like they're going to have HE loaded the whole time, or they're going to light me on fire with it. But don't be afraid. If you see a ship that maybe just damage controlled or something, switch to HE, light them back on fire. And I don't know. There's a lot of things that you gotta have to go into play. And you bring up a good point with the Bayern, the Warspite, and the Mutsu being able to overmatch bows. And in that case, you may not need to switch. You may just be able to shoot them in the bow. But I think for like the New Mexico, the Arizona, the Dunkirk, the Fuso, sometimes you got to switch to HE just so you get that damage in. And who knows, if you may get lucky and get a double fire or something. And, I know fire damage is repairable, but, if you can keep those damage controls, on cooldown and keep that guy on fire, he's going to burn out at some point. So don't be afraid to shoot HE.
See, the thing about the Arizona and the New Mexico that I think is their biggest Achilles heel, Kami, is that they have a 36-second reload for the Arizona and a 34.2-second reload for the New Mexico. Both of those things are going to make a difference as time goes on in this ranked season. And I just, as much as I love the Arizona in ranked battle or in random battles, I don't know that she's going to be as good as people think she's going to be in ranked battles. Vanessa, Arun, did you guys have anything else to throw in about battleships here?
Well, I mean, this season is really going to depend upon the cohesion of the team and the work with Smoke, because I do feel that there's going to be a lot of bow on, and, people are going to be appearing and disappearing and chilling in smoke. People are going to be yelling at their teammates to go spot, but everyone's in smoke. So you get these destroyers going back and forth, taking turns smoking, then trying to spot, and this cat and mouse game going on. And, something's going to appear, and every battleship's going to try and turn their guns as quickly as they can to get a shot before they disappear. And I don't know. I feel you're going to need something that's accurate. You're going to need something that has a spotter plane to see inside smoke. And you're going to need something that just brings a little bit of an X factor that, one of these things is not like the other. And that's where I feel that, Warspite and Mutsu might have a little edge there, just in that, because of what they bring.
You bring up a good point with the spotter plane and shooting into smoke. And that is something the Bayern doesn't have. Doesn't have a spotter plane. I believe the Arizona does. I believe the Fuso does. The New Mexico. I don't know about, does the Mutsu have a spotter plane? Kalorn?
Yes, it does.
And I believe the Warspite does too. So yeah, that brings up a good point that that the spotter plane may come into play, because it's, just like last season, shooting cruisers in smoke. It's going to become a big thing. And, with these battleships that have a lot of barrels, you're going to be able to put a lot of shells in that smoke. You may not dev strike something, but you're going to get hits. If you know how to use the spotter plane correctly. But it's interesting that we all have diverging, opinions and everything on these ships, because that's what makes this game so great, is everybody's allowed to have their own opinion on what ships they're going to make. And Kalorn brought up a great point about the reload. The New Mexico and the Arizona do have the longest reloads. And if I'm not mistaken, they have the longest reloads for battleships in the game, correct?
I believe so. Yeah. They're pretty hard to use. They're not user friendly. That's for sure. When you talk about reload times.
Yeah, and if you're a battleship player, I'm a very picky battleship player when it comes to shots. So I have a lot of patience. I get it constantly on stream. Why haven't you fired in the last minute? It's like, well, I'm waiting for the opportune time. And if you're patient with those ships, you might be able to make them work, and use the detriment of having that long reload against it. But like you said, that long reload will play into account, because there's going to be times where you fired and all of a sudden a ship appears broadside or something, and you're 25 seconds away from reloading. So I mean, you do have a point. And if long reloads and brawling situations are bad too. So there's pluses and minuses. And the Arizona AA is awful. So there is that too. And there are going to be good carrier players around. And I don't know how the carriers are going to be laid out, but everyone knows how tough it is to shoot down planes at mid tier when it comes to battleships. So that's going to play another part in your choice.
I don't think the reload is going to be much of an issue. Just use Adrenaline Rush and take a lot of damage, right? That gets the reload down really, really quickly.
Arun is suggesting you take some damage and tank, and then you'll have the same reload as everybody else.
Exactly. Sounds like a flawless plan to me.
So I think that pretty much does it, but let's go ahead and get everybody's opinions on 2 battleships that you'll play and one that you are absolutely not going to play. So, Arun, let's start with you.
I will definitely play the Fuso, and if I am going to get an Arizona, then I will also play the Arizona. Even if I had the ability to, I definitely wouldn't play Mutsu. When I played her, she just felt too lacking in terms of penetration power.
Fair enough. Vanessa, 2 battleships that you play and one that you wouldn't.
Definitely Warspite and Mutsu, and I feel, especially last season when I was trying to make the Scharnhorst work, you have to have big guns, and you have to have big guns that do serious damage in that one opportunity that you get to shoot. And if you don't make that shot work and do the best of it, then you're just not going to get your damage in. So that's why I feel Mutsu and Warspite, the accuracy and just the deadly nature of those 16-inch shells are going to do that damage when you get that one shot. As far as battleship not to take, Dunkirk. I don't even think I have the Dunkirk. So yeah, definitely not taking Dunkirk.
Fair enough. Kami, 2 that you would play and one that you wouldn't.
2 that I would play. Man, if I don't say the Fuso, does that make me a traitor to the Fuso?
Yes, it absolutely does.
Man, 2 that I would play. I would play the Fuso, and honestly, the Arizona, I think, would be my 2 choices. It's a close, though. I'm kind of liking the Dunkirk, but we'll see. But one I wouldn't play would be the Bayern. I don't think it brings anything better than the Warspite, and I think it's just average. I don't think there's anything special about it.
The Bayern, I think, is probably the most user friendly of the battleships. In terms of just like you don't take as much damage, so newer players, the Bayern might be a better option than some of these more advanced skill ships. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I'm absolutely with Vanessa and on the Warspite and the Mutsu being the 2 that I would play. Under certain circumstances, I would consider playing the Dunkirk, but I just don't see myself playing the New Mexico. I sold it a while back, and I just don't see a point in playing the New Mexico over the Arizona. So I'm going to dump on the New Mexico.
Let's not discount the recent AA buffs that New Mexico received. And a long time ago, Warspite received a little bit of an AA buff too. So that's something that both of those ships bring if you are going to start to see a few carriers.
So that's a great segue, Vanessa, into the carriers. Now, there's only 2 at this tier. There's no premium carrier at tier 6. So we have the Ryujo and the Independence. And, as we've said before, the Ryujo has obvious qualities over the Independence, just in the number of planes that it can launch, that it can do air superiority and still have some kind of strike package. But Arun, I guess the question is more is the Independence unplayable, particularly in the strike configuration? And B, how many carriers do you really expect to see on the EU server with your experience, especially with the changes that have recently been made to carriers?
So, in terms of the Independence, I think the strike Independence is... I don't even have a good analogy. It's bad. Like, so bad you probably shouldn't really even consider it. Mostly because if the opposing carrier has, like, any idea what he is doing, he is going to run circles around you very quickly. And but on top of that, I actually don't think that the... opposing carrier is going to be the biggest problem. You see, the issue with tier 6 is that your strike package planes don't always have that much health. And the problem there is that there's this ship called the Cleveland. And very unfortunately, it has some insane anti-air for tier 6. That is, if a Cleveland pops defensive anti-air, you just lost all your planes. That's it. You're done. You don't have any planes in the air anymore.
And the Independence doesn't have that big of a hangar.
Yeah, and not only Independence, it's the same for the Ryujo. And the other issue with carriers is that the power difference between air superiority carriers at tier 6 and strike carriers in fighter power is so big that what you would want is you would want to be a strike carrier to go around, striking ships, right? But the problem is that if you are a strike carrier and you run into an air superiority carrier, I think unfortunately you will be usually in a very bad position because the opponent is going to have too many fighters over you and is just going to be able to pick everything off. Now, of course, they might not deal any significant damage to your fleet either, but, they will also prevent you and probably provide more spotting than you as a result. So yeah, in my opinion, the big issue is the amount of anti-air from certain cruisers like the Cleveland, and the fact that there's a huge disparity in power. Because if you look at any other tier, or higher tiers like tier 7, then air superiority carriers don't have as big of an advantage now with strafing compared to the strike or balanced carriers than they do at tier 6. Because Ryujo is 1-2-2, and you go up against a 3-1-2? I don't think so. Your one fighter is not enough.
So, Kami, I'm going to ask you a quick hypothetical here. If for some reason AP bombs come into the game during the rank season and the Independence gets an AP bomb, does that make a difference?
I don't think so. The problem you have with the Independence is you just have such a small hangar. And if you go strike Independence, you don't get any fighters. Yeah, I don't know. I guess you can go, the Independence, I think it does get 1-1-1, right? But I just think it's small hangar. I think it only gets 30 planes. The Ryujo gets, 48?
Ryujo gets 48. Independence with the hull upgrade gets 37.
I mean, that's not that big of a difference, but I mean, it is still 11 planes. And if you go, I could see people bring Independence just to troll the crap out of people. 2 fighters just flying around and keeping I don't know. Carriers, I don't think are going to be as impactful as they have been in the past. They're going to be relegated, I think, to a lot of spotting And like Arun said, if you bring a strike Ryujo and you run into a fighter Ryujo, I mean, I don't know if your strike planes are going to survive. And the AA has been buffed at tier 6 a little bit. You guys talked about that earlier with some of the battleships, and even the Fuso got an AA buff. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how much impact the carriers have on the game. But damage wise, I know we have some players on the NA server, and I know there are players on the U server that are very carrier focused. So it'd be interesting to see how well they do, how well they in matches. So I don't know. If I had to choose a carrier, I'd probably choose the Ryuzo, just because you get more planes, you get more coverage of the map, and USN carriers, even with the 1,000-pound bombs, I don't think it would make that big of a difference, because, like Arun said, there's going to be a lot of Clevelands, and typically the Cleveland, is going to be sitting in smoke with the battleship. So I mean, it's going to make it really tough to strike a battleship or even the Cleveland. And as you guys talked about earlier, with the way the bombs work, it's going to be tough to hit stuff.
So, Vanessa, kind of the last point on carriers, do you expect to see people running strike packages, or do you expect exclusively air superiority? And when you do look at the air superiority between the two carriers, the Ryujo gets 15 planes if you have the skill, and the Independence gets 14. There's really not much difference, yet the Ryujo still gets a torpedo bomber and a dive bomber, where the Independence only gets a dive bomber squadron.
Yes, so really, if you went strike, maybe if you were really good at, I don't know, tricking the other carrier and maybe going after those destroyers, if you are a really good destroyer hunter as a CV player and, could go out there and get that destroyer that's maybe racing for a cap ahead of their team and get that before, the enemy fighters show up, maybe. But I mean, the long-term end game, I mean, how, that's kind of your working, that's kind of your one trick pony. And then if that doesn't work, then what are you going to do the rest of the match? The air superiority, yeah, you're going to spot. I mean, it's going to be very much like Supremacy League or any other type of competitive where, information is key. So you don't want to keep those fighters up there spotting. And, the dive bombers, again, if you are incredible with destroyer hunting, if they don't change it to AP bombs, if they are changed to AP bombs, then, well, if a battleship is off by themselves, then they deserve what they get. So I don't know. I can't see Independence working. I cannot. Ryujo, you have options. You can at least scout, you can strike, you can defend, you can do everything with that carrier. You just can't with Indy.
Well, I think that that pretty much is the consensus, that if you want to play a carrier, play a Ryujo. Arun, well, we really appreciate having you on the show today. I realize that we went pretty long today in terms of a podcast, almost an hour and a half. We just really appreciate having you back. It's kind of a tradition for us to have you to talk about ranked seasons.
Well, it was nice to be here. I always love hearing about the ranked season as well, especially this one, the opinions of other people, because this one is the one I'm least certain of in terms of like what might happen. So it was very nice to hear that.
Yeah, I think that this one's going to be very different than the ranked season that we just got, that we had the last seasons we had with the tier 7. So I honestly don't know. We might end up seeing a whole bunch of battleships and destroyers like we did not too long ago, and we might see a whole bunch of cruisers. I'm really kind of curious to see how it all kind of shakes out. I feel like cruisers have been increasing in their power relative to battleships lately in terms of the patches and things that they're getting. So that might make a difference and increase the cruiser numbers that end up in the queue. But well, that's all for this week, folks. As always, follow us on Facebook and Twitter for updates between podcasts. We, of course, want to thank our amazing Patreon backers. If you're interested in supporting us, please consider becoming a Patreon backer yourself. When we really appreciate the support from that. Take care, everyone, and we will see you next week.